took that decision, indeed, after I've had some consultation, particularly with the Auditor General, and we thought it is important that we worked quite well with them in a similar exercise with Transnet. And it was the view of the Auditor General that in these circumstances, we didn't do that extensive consultation as we did in respect of Transnet. And we appreciate that. And secondly, there has been legitimate concerns about the corruption in Eskom and the potential implication of the exemption in entrenching the corrupt activities. And we are mindful of that. And as part of that process is to how to make sure that we entrench the checks and balances to satisfy the interests of the public.
So then, Minister, who is it that you and the team consulted with when the initial decision was made? And what were you hoping were going to be the immediate benefits for Eskom in particular when this decision was made? Many saying it was made in haste as well.
I don't want to go into detail on the entire consultation process, but it's safe to say there's a government process under NICOM. There's a stream of NICOM which from July last year have been discussing in the government situation as how to deal with this matter. And finally, Eskom made the application to us. And in terms of Section 92 of the PFMA, I'm entitled as a Minister of Finance to grant that exemption. Of course, we did some consultation with AG, but not as detailed, as extensive as we had done, and with other relevant stakeholders. And we granted the exemption. But the exemption does not preclude Eskom reporting on those irregular expenditures which have led to a loss for the institution. It's only those irregular expenditures which have not led to a loss which will be reported in the annual report.
So, Minister, you're saying that you will be, it's been suspended for now and there'll be further consultation. What time frame are you giving yourselves as the ministry to consult, as you say, and reinitiate this particular exemption, if at all, once again?
We work back from the fact that by the end of May, Eskom has got to submit the financial statements. Working back from that, we've got to make sure that by that time, we must have concluded the discussion and made the decision. In that regard, tomorrow we'll be issuing a gazette which withdraws the one which was published on the 31st of March, and a new one which cancels that one, but at the same time extend an invitation to the public to make submission by the 21st of April.
Minister, let's quickly just talk further about that. So I suppose what's going to happen now is that you will be going back, as you say, to engage the Auditor General there. But I'm wondering about the implications for how the audits will follow or unfold following this reinitiation after the consultation process has been done, and the extra work that will be put on the Auditor General as she combs through, or the office rather combs through the different financial statements that will be produced by Eskom going forward.
Let me just say there are two reports which institutions of the state produce. The first one is annual financial statements. The second one is the annual report. We have said some of those irregular expenditures which have got no loss for the institution must be reported in the annual report. In other words, there will always be transparency and accountability, even in respect of those activities. But in respect of those which have led to a loss to the state or the institution, those must be reported in the annual financial statements. That's precisely what we're doing. So there's two forms of report, both of whom are under the scrutiny of the Auditor General.
Minister, is it not of concern that the interim statement that was released by Eskom on Friday was late, and the Chief Financial Officer, the acting Chief Financial Officer, indicating that the coming financial statements will also be delayed by a couple of weeks? Those delays, do they not concern you when it comes to initiating important policies of this nature?
There are two things we must separate. We must separate the performance of Eskom and all other related misconducts which you find in Eskom, which we all condemn, including the corrupt activities which are revered in Eskom. And that's one sort of issues which you are referring to, and we also do not accept. However, we've got another responsibility from a fiscal side of things. To what extent is Eskom posing a fiscal risk? And how do we, as a department, mitigate that risk? I think that's where our focus is on mitigating that risk. Eskom, unlike Transnet, poses a major risk for the state because we have an exposure of about 250 billion rand, which is guaranteed with Eskom. So we've got to keep always on guard. And from where we come from, we're coming from a perspective of mitigating that risk.
And absolutely, Minister. So now that you're going to be, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, and you indicated you'll be engaging the Auditor General, what are the implications for the office? And really just, well, rather, in fact, before we move to that, Minister, I just want to stick on the finances on Eskom there that you've just spoken about. This issue of the debt relief bill, if you will, that being signed into existence, but also the conditions that Eskom will be provided with there, just to make sure that they are operating in the manner that they should, a return of investment, if you will.
That's precisely emphasizing the risk Eskom poses. We are taking a quantum leap and a risk and bailing out the institution to the tune of 254 billion rand in the medium term. That in itself is a major risk for us. And therefore, if anything else happens into Eskom, which will require another fiscal injection, is unaffordable. So we've got to take steps up front to mitigate such a risk. That's actually that injection of 254 billion rand emphasizes the seriousness with which we take the Eskom problem.
So, Minister, I just want us to get absolute clarity on this so that we're all on the same page. When you did speak to the Auditor General, what exactly is it that you discussed with her around the framework of this exemption? Because it has been indicated, there was a briefing earlier on and there were engagements that were had, and someone from National Treasury, Makhosi Iliketa, actually indicating that you were only going to approach the Auditor General after that exemption was announced. So in your engagement prior to the exemption, what exactly is it that you engaged the Auditor General on, and what were the views from the office in that regard?
The information I have was that there was some engagement, but the engagement was at a very low level, and therefore was not extensive as would have required. Normally, that engagement, as we did in Transnet, a matter I conceded to the AG yesterday, that at the level of Transnet was an engagement at a higher level, including the AG and the acting DG. So the level of engagement was not to the satisfaction of the AG, and I consider that point correctly so. Yeah.
So you would concede then, Minister, that the decision shouldn't have been made in the first place if you were not satisfied with the level of engagement that was had. That exemption notice should have not been put through. And I suppose people are wondering, why was it done in such haste? Why was it so urgent that this be put through without the satisfactory level of engagement that you've just described to us?
Let me just say, I'm saying the discussion that came through to me about the level of engagement were only discussed after the fact. In other words, the AG
That's the problem, Minister. That is the problem, in that such an important piece of policy is put through.
Can I just finish? Can I just finish?
Go ahead.
Can I just finish? I'm saying that was drawn to my attention after the fact, okay? That's the first point. The second point, the target was the end of the financial year, which was the 31st of March. So there's nothing untoward in doing that. There's also nothing untoward in understanding once a matter is drawn to our attention and we react to it.
Yes, but Minister, I think the point, and I think many of our viewers are in line with this point, is that you are conceding that there was not enough consultation. You were also receiving information which then informed the decision that was made. And I think it has to be noted that the consultation process only happened afterwards and will now go extensively as you reflect on what has been the outrage that has been poured out since. So as you wrap up our conversation, Minister, please just engage us on why it was seen to be important to initiate this piece of policy in the amount of time that it was. You say 31st of May, March was the time that it would have been implemented, but the time that the announcement was made and the implementation time, many would say, was quite quick. So the urgency in which this decision was made, was there a specific reason, Minister?
No. The application by Eskom was dated the 9th of March, and it reached National Treasury on the 12th of March. And therefore, the National Treasury has been interacting with Eskom and the relevant stakeholders during that period. And the targeted date is normally, which is ideal, in the end of the financial year, so that the exemption coincides with the end of the financial year. There was nothing untoward in this regard.
Then finally, Minister, on to another matter which we must get an update on, the greylisting that we're currently in and efforts that are being made by your office to just get South Africa out of that greylisting. Any updates that the nation should know about when it comes to efforts that are being made by the Finance Minister? You would appreciate that an about turn of this nature with this exemption may raise the eyes of those who are watching South Africa's financial institutions, SOEs, very closely at the moment.
The greylisting at the moment relates not to the financial issues. Those issues have been cleared, including our financial institutions. The greylisting relates to the effectiveness in relation to the security cluster. And those are the outstanding matters. The process, we've had an interdepartmental committee which has been working on this matter and is seized with this matter as we speak. And that interdepartmental committee will report to Cabinet on a quarterly basis in order to meet the target of January 25th of January of 2025.
Before we let you go, Minister, one more. On the issue of the state of disaster that was also revoked today, have you had any engagements with the rest of the government or the team that you work closely with in terms of the Ministry of Electricity and its future henceforth?
No, the Minister of Electricity is not related to the disaster. The Minister of Electricity is related to the entire project of working with the President in coordinating for the President the work that has got to be done to end load shedding, irrespective of whether there's a disaster declaration or not. As to the disaster declaration, the Minister of Cocta was busy with it. I was busy with my own challenges over the weekend, as you know. This particular matter and the fact that I lost my chief of staff at the same time. So I've been occupied with a number of stuff, and may soul rest in peace. So I've been preoccupied with those issues.
No, absolutely, and we send our condolences to your Chief of Staff, Minister, on that. But thank you for taking the time to engage us this afternoon on these difficult matters. That is Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana joining us, Sally, this afternoon on these matters around the exemption that was granted and then not granted, and the engagement that happened and didn't happen, and really what we're going to see going forward.
Thank you so much for that, Rupiwa Madzena. I do appreciate that. We're going to get more details on the story and the reactions, particularly that concession from the Minister that they really did not speak to the Auditor General in the detail that they likely should have before making this decision.